Hello and welcome to another ommmsome podcast episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm so very grateful that you're listening to my podcast. And if you have never spoken to me, or maybe you haven't, like maybe you follow me on Instagram, but you have never sent me a message, please do. Just let me know that you're listening to the podcast, that you're listening to this episode, and I would love to know who you are, where you're from, what brings you to my podcast, which episode inspired you, and maybe what changed in your life or thinking, or some small thing. Maybe just, you got an inspiration for a day from my podcast. So please get in touch or just send me a message. Hey, I listened to your podcast. I'll be super grateful because it's very nice to know who's on the other side listening. So today I'm bringing you an episode on my favorite teachers and who I have learned from on my journey. I must say there have been many teachers that I've been learning from, but just to go a little bit back why I've been doing that. So since the very age of, I think, like 14, 15, I can't remember exactly what was the book, but there was something about positive thinking, because I remember myself writing on the mirror, I'm beautiful, I'm happy, I'm grateful, things like that in Latvian. I would put in sticky notes, and I would very often hide those, or they would be somewhere, but I knew that you can program yourself like that. And I was like, okay, well, let's see if it works, because I never believed that I was beautiful, till very recent, to be honest. So that was something that, it was just on my path, and I was like, okay, I'll use it. And then later on, I was reading some books of Og Mandino, Paulo Coelho. That inspired my I would say, very early development. But later on, if we go to the spiritual side, I was in Christian church, so there was a lot about Bible and all that. But it took me a while to understand what religion and what spirituality is, because I was always thinking it's one, and then my first book on spirituality was actually understanding the difference between relationship and love, or love between two people, and this universal agape love. And my first teacher, through a book that I accidentally found at the end of in Shavasana at one of the first yoga classes I went to. I wasn't interested in yoga. I just went because, I was living in Canada, and it was sort of cool thing to do. Everyone was doing yoga, so I went as well. And I really loved the class. And there was a teacher was reading this book in Shavasana. It was from Baba Ram Dass, from Be Love Now. And since I'm very shy Latvian, I would just go by and check out the title of the book, order it on Amazon, start reading, and my world totally flipped. Like, it just turned 360 around. I had never understood that there can be experience, and that there is such love as this universal agape love, so yeah, that was my first. And I just remember that summer I was like high on love. Like, there was nothing else I was doing. I was just reading this book, understanding how beautiful love is. And I also believe now that, these books or works of art or music, anything creative, it transfers the energy from. So if that person wrote the book with love, you can read the words, and the words might not make sense, but the energy will make sense to you. So it's very, very interesting. I would say the same about Rumi books. I would say the same about some music, and it's a very interesting way to bring yourself either up or down. Sometimes we want to feel sad, so there is music. I have particular songs that will just bring me to this super sadness, and there are books that I can read and feel this huge love. Well, back to books and back to teachers. So Baba Ram Dass was one of the first ones. Then I think I was listening a little bit to his lectures on YouTube, and there have been many people who had been reading Eckhart Tolle at the time. And I'm very often skeptical, and like really, since I studied history, I always know, okay, who wrote this book? Why is it so popular? If the book is super popular, I don't believe too much in it. Like, I need like a hidden treasure that I dig out, from somewhere. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, I love this book. So I was a bit skeptical, but I was like, okay, I'll try. I'll give it a try. So I got the book, New Earth, I think it was called. It wasn't The Power of Now. It was the other one, the orange one. And I learned a lot about the pain body and ego, and I could really, really distinguish where I'm acting like that in life. So if you've read any of his books, or if you're wondering what his books are about, so if you want to learn about where you put yourself in victim mode, I think the most important quote for me in that book was, where like whenever there's a situation, you always have a choice. You can put yourself in victim mode, or you can make a choice and, you know, like do something about it. So we often tend to keep ourselves in this kind of situations, like you're not making a decision, right? You're just in this gray zone thinking about it. So he was really, it's like, okay, this is the situation. What do I do something about it, or do I remove myself from it? And I would quote his books very often. So somewhere on my Instagram, you'll totally find some of his quotes, and especially this one, because I remember this. So with Eckhart Tolle, yeah, I really, really remembered. Also, his own story is very inspirational, you know, like being through depression, living, you know, on park benches, and then writing this book is pretty, it's like, wow, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're such a genius. So I think it both comes the same as Baba Ram Das, like his travel, his journey through psychedelics and all that LSD part. I was like, oh my gosh, spirituality and LSD, this doesn't go together. And I was like, okay, Monta, stop. That's your judgment. That's your square space, your cubicle where you put yourself in. Look around, see what's his, you know, what he's sharing, what is the knowledge, what is something that, you know, he's putting out there. So yeah, then Osho, if you've seen the Netflix documentary, I don't think it's documentary, to be honest. It's just about one part of his journey, and you're super skeptical and judgmental about Osho, then I would say read some of his books, listen to lectures, and listen to the knowledge that he's sharing. One thing is that we very often, we're humans. We are like, okay, you have Rolls Royce. I don't like you, and I'm not going to listen to whatever you preach, teach, or whatever knowledge, whatever you're channeling, whatever information you're channeling from a higher consciousness. And I started reading Osho way before this Netflix came out, and I've seen a part of the Netflix series. And to be honest, like I didn't find it very interesting, because I'm more like, I will spend that time to actually read a lecture or listen. Yeah, I mean, his books are the lectures that he gave in India. And try to see if any of that knowledge is something that I would love to apply in my life, rather than, you know, just watch the Netflix documentary and judge him. So, I mean, I like using my time wisely, and that's for me is wise. And also recently we did a podcast with Chandras, and we little bit touched this question, and we talked about if it triggers you, the Rolls Royce or the money he had, or, you know, the crazy followers, then look inside of yourself. What is there that you can't accept about money, what you can't accept about followings and all that? And what I learned from Osho, definitely, well, I think one of his first, I'm sorry about my voice, it's been weird a little bit. I think the air is getting super, super humid here, and it's changing my voice. But anyhow, what I've learned from Osho, first book that I read was, I think, in Latvian. It was a book about sex. And again, like, he showed me that sex and sexuality are two different things, that you can distinguish between sex and sexuality. You don't have to always think like, okay, if I have sex with someone, that's my sexuality. My sexuality is always just about wanting sex. No, there's more to it. So that was big, big, big learning. Another huge thing that it just engraved in my brain is that you're never alone in the bedroom when you are making love with someone. There is always the judgment from your mother, father, your priest, the religion, how you're doing, when you're doing, like all these things that we have in our mind. You're never like very present with the person, being there open sexually and truly enjoying each other's bodies, and that you can achieve enlightenment through sexuality, through the act of love, and making love. So there was a lot. It's really provoking, provocative, because it makes you think. You can't you can be like that. You can read a chapter, and then you're like, oh my gosh, no, this is not true, and you just shut yourself down because it triggers you. Or you can read through and really find the questions to ask yourself, like, what do I think about sexuality? What do I think about sex? What is the act of love? What is the act of sex for me? What do I think when I make love to someone? Oh my gosh, like there was a lot. And that was one. Then I read Osho's book about men, book about women, I think it was more about, yeah, these energies, the female and the male energy. I don't remember so much exactly, but I love his teachings. I think he was an amazing teacher who brought so much, a very brave teacher, a super rebel. Imagine in 70s talking about sex in India. You can't open mouth and talk about sex in many places in the world nowadays, but he did that ages ago. So wow, like super, super big respect for this man. Um, Okay, next one. If you have more questions at any point, you can always email me or ask me to do another episode. Like I'm really like, or if you want to discuss this with me, I'm up for it. Even if you have like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna, kill her with my questions. Like, come for it. You can kill me. It's fine. I love when people, challenge me with whatever they think, and I don't have to always prove myself or my truth to anyone. I'm always willing to learn and see where discussion brings us. So yeah, if you want it, like, bring it on, email me, we can do an episode together. Next one, Krishnamurti. His books maybe are not as popular as Osho or Ram Dass, but he's an philosopher as well, and I would say a guru. Like he's more for the intellect, and his book, Freedom from the Known, I really, really loved what I learned, that it was you never do things for others, you always do things for yourself. And that was so important for me, because I would often be like, oh, I want to do this for this person and this for that person, and actually I would feel that I'm doing this for myself, but there's a shame in that. There's like you can feel guilty, like, oh my gosh, I'm just doing things for myself. It's like, no, you do everything for yourself. And once you admit that, it's very easy to live. Like I can say, I do this podcast for you because you asked me to talk about the teachers. But to be honest, I'm doing it for myself. Like I love sharing the knowledge. I love bringing out. I'm sharing for you to grow. But to be honest, it's for me as well, because if I see you grow, it's like, it makes me happy. It makes me satisfied if I see like it inspires you to read another book. So that's what I learned from Krishnamurti, because he was very super honest, and it's like, we're all doing things for ourselves. And of course, it's like, it's in a context in a book. So read his book if you're struggling with the question of like, oh, I think, oh, I'm doing everything for everyone else, but I kind of feel like I'm also doing for myself. So he will show you the answer there. Next, and I think it's going to be the last one, which I close with, Sadguru. So with Sadguru, it was a longer journey, because I found him through YouTube, just a suggestion, blah, blah, blah. And I started listening to his lectures. Then later on, I started doing meditation, because he also challenged about chanting, and I was like, I don't chant. Like I was super skeptical to all other religions for a very long time, besides like Christianity, because I grew up like that, and for me it was engraved. It's a shame, blame, and guilt, and it's a sin to like to listen to any other religion and all that. And it took a long time to heal, actually, and understand that there's something higher than religion. There's spirituality. And Sadhguru was one of the teachers that I really, really learned a lot to understand, also through intellect. He speaks a lot for your brain. And then when you go to ashram in India, it's like totally, you're just like in this space where everything can confuse you and then bring you clarity. Confuse you, bring clarity. Confuse you, bring clarity. But you have the clarity through what you experience, so you have it truly for you. You don't have it because he tells you the right answer. This is a lot with the true teachers. You will see they confuse you. They say like one day you eat, like you should eat rice, the next day they're like you shouldn't eat rice, and then you have to eat rice to decide for yourself if rice is good for you. So it's perfect. I absolutely love it, because it's through the experience. And one of the greatest teachings he told and shared was, he just asked the question like, have you experienced this? No, then stop talking about it. So if I ever teach you something or share this with you, I'm sharing from what I've experienced. If I was talking to you about levitating and, living for a month without food, I would be just sharing thoughts of others. But when I'm saying like, fasting or dry fasting is super good and I get such focus and this and that, is because I've tried it. So What I experienced at Sadhguru's ashram, a deep feeling of love, of belonging. And that was on the first day, just arriving there without knowing anyone. I just walked in the temple and I was like, oh my gosh, I've arrived home. And I cried. I was weeping. I hadn't experienced that since times when I was praying as a kid, looking in the stars and just, believing that there is something more than just my body, I suppose, at that time. I didn't think about those things at that time. That was just like, I'm profound, I'm huge, and this world is beautiful. That was the feeling, and I arrived there, and it's like, wow. And, there was also a lot of like, oh, I made it to Sadhguru's ashram, and I made it to India safe and sound. And I also learned that I can scream and shout, I can release, that most of the times, I'm just longing for connection and being with the divine, that it's not about people. And very often I confuse that I see a person, I get super attached because I see divine in them, and that I always have to go back to this, like, I'm just living this life for the divine energy to flow through me. And some other things that I learned, I think most of the stuff I learned about yoga, breathing, chanting, energy is from the teachings, but what I learned on, I think, more from the courses that I took on ashram, because we could ask questions, they explained, and really, really like embracing your energy body. And I also did 7 days of silence with him. I think it was 2 years ago, and that was a huge lesson for my monkey mind. And imagine being 900 people together in one huge building, but sleeping, meditating, and we were eating in another place, but like being there all the time, 100%. And they're very strict. This is the bathroom break. This is the meditation time. This is this time. This is bedtime. So for 7 days, you're totally in their arms, in their grace. You're not allowed to talk, to look at anyone, but still at the same time, you're very much together, and people go through shit, Like I went through, I think 3-4 days of, why am I here? Why have I spent so much money? What am I going to do afterwards? And then I really, really felt what, the decisions that I'm procrastinating with, and that what I haven't decided in my life, they're really bothering me. And that's where, like Eckhart Tolle comes in with his knowledge. It's like, okay, this is the situation, you decide. And like, why would you just like lengthen this forever? Just decide. And at that time I was like, should I go back to Panama? Should I go to Vietnam? And, for the first 3 days, like my mind is like that. And it's like, please, if I had decided before, I would have maybe gotten into meditation, but also it's a part of the journey. So if you want to learn more about this, there is a short video on my Instagram about these 7 days. It's filmed right after coming out from this. And, but if you want another episode on this, just let me know. Just email me or message me in the comments. And this is the last. Okay, I'll just let you know what other teachers I've learned from, because there's not so much time. I want to keep these episodes up to just like 20 minutes. So I'm at the moment, I'm learning a lot from Michael Beckwith. I'm learning also from Napoleon Hill, from Brené Brown. I did Life Book with Mind Valley. It's an amazing course. I listened to Tea with Gary Vee. He's someone who's going to kick your ass. Chandresh, we just did a podcast together. So if you go a couple episodes back, you'll see my episode with him. Amazing, amazing, amazing Tantra teacher. His book, Break the Norms, really like it's going to show you how to be a rebel, but also understand yourself at the same time. Robin Sharma, learned from him a long time ago. He's more back into my life because my friends are listening and reading his books, so we're discussing it a little bit more. Deepak Chopra, love anything on like truly on healing, holistic healing. His book for the whole body mind approach is amazing. I listened to audiobook. I don't remember the name exactly now. Then also Tony Robbins' podcast. I love his podcast because that's more on business and mindset. And I haven't listened to Tony Robbins in a little while, but also my friends are a lot into him, so I get all the teaching all the time somewhere. Then Louis Hose, love his podcast. Tim Ferriss is the only newsletter that I've subscribed to. I love breath work with Wim Hof, with Alchemy of Breath, and my most favorite, and that's for me, relaxing divine cherry on the top of any cake Rumi and poetry. I just love it. It's just something for me. That's divine. I read his poetry, I cry, and I feel alive again. So yeah, thank you so much for listening and for tuning in. Again, if you're listening to this, please subscribe. Please leave me a comment, leave some stars, and just message me, hey, I listened to this episode. Thanks. And my favorite teacher is this. I learned this from them. Or just send me a message. I listened to your podcast. That's going to be enough. Lots of love, lots of light, and blessings. Thank you again.